In the outlaw motorcycle world, territory is everything. It's not just land, it's identity, income, and power. When two 1% clubs ride the same roads, tension doesn't announce itself with gunfire. It arrives quietly, through looks held too long, bars suddenly avoided, and messages delivered through intermediaries who never write anything down. This is the story of two of America's most feared outlaw motorcycle clubs, the Pagans Motorcycle Club and the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, and what happens when their paths collide. The Pagan Nation, East Coast Discipline. Founded in 1959 in Prince George's County, Maryland, the Pagans MC grew into a dominant East Coast force during the 1960s and 70s. Unlike some clubs that leaned heavily into chaos and spectacle, the Pagans cultivated a reputation for structure, hierarchy, and internal discipline. Their blue and white patch became a warning sign across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and down into Virginia and Florida. The pagan identity was shaped by control. Chapters answered upward. Orders moved down quietly. Loyalty was expected, not negotiated. Over decades, the Pagans embedded themselves into the criminal undercurrent of the Northeast, focusing on drug distribution, enforcement, and territorial control. They didn't need to shout. Their reputation did the work for them. The Bandidos, Texas-born expansion. The Bandidos MC was founded in 1966 in San Leon, Texas, by Vietnam veteran Donald Chambers. From the start, the club carried a more openly militant identity. Their red and gold colors, their caricature mascot, and their aggressive recruitment style reflected a club that embraced visibility as a weapon. The Bandidos expanded fast and wide. From Texas, they pushed west into California, north into the Midwest, and eventually overseas into Europe, Australia, and Asia. By the late 1990s, the Bandidos were no longer just a regional club. They were an international outlaw brand. Where the Pagans favored tight regional dominance, the Bandidos favored numbers, reach, and confrontation. Their growth inevitably brought them into contact with clubs that already controlled ground. Overlapping territory, rising pressure. For years, the Pagans and Bandidos existed on parallel tracks. One ruled the East, the other consolidated the South and Southwest. But expansion doesn't respect tradition. As Bandidos chapters began appearing in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and parts of the Midwest, areas long considered pagan adjacent, the unspoken rules of separation began to erode. Neither club announced war. Instead, pressure built through proxy confrontations. Support clubs were warned. Independent riders were forced to choose sides. Bars that once welcomed everyone suddenly enforced private events. In the outlaw world, these are not coincidences. They are early symptoms. Law enforcement watches the fault line. Federal agencies were already deeply embedded in both organizations. The ATF, FBI, and state task forces had spent decades mapping pagan and bandido hierarchies. What concerned them wasn't just criminal activity, it was escalation. Historically, when major 1% clubs clash, violence doesn't stay contained. Innocent spaces become collateral. Rivalries turn public. Law enforcement understood that if the Pagans and Bandidos moved from tension to action, the result would be unpredictable and costly. This surveillance pressure added another layer. Every move risked exposure. Every reaction could trigger indictments. Incidents without headlines. Unlike some biker conflicts marked by single explosive events, the Pagan-Bandido friction unfolded in fragments. Assaults that went unclaimed. Clubhouses vandalized with no signatures. Members arrested in traffic stops that hinted at deeper intelligence. In several cases across the 2000s and 2010s, Pagan-affiliated individuals were charged in cases involving violence against Bandido associates or support clubs. Elsewhere, Bandidos members were accused of attempting to establish footholds in regions long hostile to their presence. Each incident was officially isolated. Collectively, they told a different story: codes, pride, and the refusal to back down. Neither club could afford to appear weak. In the 1% world, retreat invites replacement. The Pagans relied on their reputation for enforcement. The Bandidos relied on their size and international backing. But open war carried risks neither side could fully control. Law enforcement pressure, RICO statutes, and the lessons learned from past biker wars loomed large. Survival meant restraint, but restraint bred resentment. The Cold War on two wheels. What emerged was not a shooting war, but a biker Cold War. Boundaries hardened. Communication ceased. Neutral ground disappeared. Support clubs became buffers and flashpoints. This kind of conflict is slower, quieter, and often more dangerous. It can last years without resolution, flaring suddenly when conditions change. A new leader, a prison release, a single miscalculated insult. Where things stand. Today, both the Pagans MC and the Bandidos MC remain active, powerful, and under constant scrutiny. Their rivalry never exploded into a single defining battle, but its influence reshaped how both clubs operate, expand, and defend territory. In the outlaw motorcycle world, not all wars are fought with bullets. Some are fought with patience, memory, and the certainty that roads are never truly shared. Because in this life, there is always another mile, and someone waiting at the end of it. The American landscape is crisscrossed by thousands of miles of interstate, but for the members of the 1%er world, these roads are not public infrastructure. They are supply lines, recruitment corridors, and sovereign territory. Among the Big Four outlaw motorcycle clubs, OMCs, the rivalry between the Pagans MC and the Bandidos MC stands as one of the most culturally distinct and strategically violent. While the Hells Angels and Outlaws MC have fought the Great Biker War of the North, the Pagans and Bandidos have engaged in a decades-long struggle for the soul of the Mid-Atlantic and the American South. The blueprints of rebellion, divergent origins. To understand the modern conflict, one must analyze the sociological DNA of both organizations. They were born from the same post-World War II disillusionment but adopted vastly different operational philosophies. The Pagans, the nomadic enigma. Founded in 1959 by Lou Dobkin in Prince George's County, Maryland, the Pagans were originally a nonviolent group of enthusiasts. However, by the mid-1960s, the culture shifted. Under the leadership of John Satan Marin, the Pagans transformed into a disciplined, highly secretive paramilitary organization. Unlike other clubs that followed the California model, a mother chapter overseeing local chapters, the Pagans functioned for decades as a nomadic brotherhood. Their structure was flatter, making them incredibly difficult for the FBI to infiltrate. Their patch, the fire giant Surtur sitting on the sun, was a deliberate departure from the common death head or skulls motifs. They didn't wear rockers, curved patches indicating territory, on the back of their vests for a long time, because they believed their presence alone established their territory. If you saw a pagan, you knew you were in pagan country. The Bandidos, the Texas powerhouse. 7 years later, in 1966, Donald Chambers founded the Bandidos in San Leon, Texas. Chambers, a Vietnam veteran, wanted a club that prioritized Marine-style discipline and rapid territorial acquisition. The Fat Mexican patch was a nod to the Frito Bandido character of the time, but the club's actions were anything but a caricature. The Bandidos operated on a franchise model. They were empire builders. They moved with a speed that shocked the OMC world, spreading across Texas, into the Northwest, and eventually overseas to Scandinavia and Australia. Their philosophy was one of presence through volume. While the Pagans remained a largely East Coast phenomenon, the Bandidos sought global hegemony. The geography of friction, the blue line, and the eastern push. The conflict between these two titans is primarily a story of geographical encroachment. For 30 years, an invisible line existed. The Bandidos owned the South and the West, while the Pagans owned the I-95 corridor from New York to Virginia. The inevitable collision. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Bandidos began to feel the constraints of their territory. Seeking to control the distribution points for narcotics entering the U.S. through East Coast ports, the Bandidos began patching over smaller, independent clubs in Virginia, North Carolina, and West Virginia. To the Pagans, this was an existential threat. The Pagans view the Mid-Atlantic not just as their home, but as their sovereign domain. When the Bandidos established a chapter in Richmond, Virginia, it was viewed as a formal declaration of war. The border states became a no-man's land, where members from both sides would frequently engage in high-speed chases, roadside shootings, and patch pulling, the ultimate act of humiliation where a member is forcibly stripped of his vest. The 1990s, the era of tactical violence. By the 1990s, the rivalry moved from barroom brawls to coordinated tactical strikes. This era was characterized by the use of cold hits, ambushes where the attackers used stolen vehicles and untraceable weapons to minimize forensic evidence. The Long Island Incident. While the Pagans were primarily focused on the Bandidos, they were also fighting a two-front war against the Hells Angels expansion into New York. In 2002, the infamous Hell's Kitchen brawl occurred at a tattoo expo in Long Island. While the Bandidos were not directly involved in the fight, they utilized the chaos to strengthen their ties with the Outlaws MC, the Pagans' traditional rivals. This enemy of my enemy strategy forced the Pagans into a defensive posture, leading to a series of retaliatory bombings of Bandidos-affiliated clubhouses in the South. The internal purges. Both clubs suffered from internal paranoia during this period. The Bandidos underwent a series of cleansings, where members suspected of being weak or being federal informants were out in bad, often a euphemism for being executed. The Pagans, meanwhile, became increasingly insular, implementing black t-shirt phases where members were forbidden from wearing their colors in public to avoid police surveillance, further driving their operations underground. Operation Black Patch and the Federal Hammer. The turning point in the conflict wasn't a battle between the clubs, but a battle against the state. In the mid-2000s, the ATF and FBI launched a series of sophisticated undercover operations that leveraged the very thing that made these clubs strong, their brotherhood. Infiltrating the fire giant. Operation Black Patch, 2009, remains one of the most devastating blows to the Pagans. Federal agents managed to flip high-ranking members who provided evidence of a massive conspiracy involving the distribution of cocaine and meth, as well as plots to murder members of the Hells Angels and Bandidos. The indictments revealed a chilling reality. The Pagans had been maintaining hit lists of rival members. The subsequent arrests decimated the Pagans' mother club, their national leadership, leaving the organization in a state of temporary anarchy. The Bandidos and the Waco fallout. While the Bandidos were dealing with the Pagans in the East, they faced their own reckoning in the West. The 2015 Twin Peaks shootout in Waco, Texas, was a watershed moment. While the primary combatants were the Bandidos and the Cossacks, the event resulted in 9 deaths, 18 injuries, and 177 arrests. The legal aftermath of Waco gave the federal government the leverage it needed. In 2018, the national president of the Bandidos, Jeffrey Pike, and national vice president Xavier Ramos were convicted on multiple counts of racketeering and murder. The trial exposed the Bandidos' internal war wagon tactics, coordinated strike teams used to intimidate rivals and rogue members alike. The modern era, recruitment, and the new breed. Following the federal crackdowns of 2009 to 2018, many analysts predicted the end of the outlaw era. They were wrong. Instead of fading away, both the Pagans and the Bandidos have entered a period of aggressive rebranding and recruitment. The Pagans' Southern strategy. Under new leadership in the late 2010s, the Pagans did something unprecedented. They began a massive recruitment drive in Florida and Puerto Rico. Traditionally a whites-only club, the Pagans began relaxing their racial boundaries in certain chapters to bolster their numbers against the Bandidos and the Outlaws. This new breed of Pagan is often younger, more tech-savvy, and less concerned with the old traditions of the 1960s. The Bandidos global pivot. The Bandidos have responded by leaning into their international strength. With the U.S. leadership under constant surveillance, the club's power center has partially shifted toward its European and Australian chapters. This global network allows for a level of financial stability and resource sharing that the more localized pagans struggle to match. The war between the pagans and the Bandidos is a cycle of action and reaction. Every time the Bandidos push into a new town in Pennsylvania, the pagans respond with a recruitment drive in Texas or Florida. Every time the feds take down a chapter president, a sergeant-at-arms is waiting in the wings to take his place. The conflict persists because it is built on a foundation of identity. For a pagan, the Bandido is a plastic outlaw, a corporate-style expansionist with no respect for the old ways. For a Bandido, the pagan is a relic, a stubborn holdout clinging to a tiny piece of the map while the rest of the world moves on. As we move further into the 2020s, the battleground is shifting. It is fought in the digital space through encrypted apps, in the courts through high-priced defense attorneys, and still, occasionally, on the dark stretches of the I-95 at 3 a.m. The oath remains broken, the rivalry remains bloodied, and the engines continue to roar. In the world of the pagans and Bandidos, a piece of embroidered denim or leather is more than clothing. It is a sacred object. Both clubs have rigid protocols regarding their colors, and the differences in their visual identity reflect their divergent philosophies. The pagans, the Surtur mystery. The pagans are unique among the Big Four, because their center patch does not feature the typical skull or engine imagery. Instead, it depicts Surtur, the Norse fire giant, wielding a flaming sword. The 13, Symbolism. For decades, the pagans were governed by a group of 13 members known as the Mother Club. This number is reflected in several of their internal rituals and is often tattooed on members. Denim versus leather. While many clubs transition to heavy leather vests, cuts, for protection and prestige, the pagans famously stuck to denim vests for a significantly longer period, maintaining a blue-collar aesthetic that signaled their roots in the mid-Atlantic working class. The Bandidos, the fat Mexican, and red and gold. The Bandidos colors are red and gold, a combination they guard with extreme prejudice. The weaponry of the patch, the fat Mexican, logo specifically features a machete and a pistol. To the Bandidos, this isn't just art, it is a mission statement. They are one of the few clubs that explicitly incorporates modern weaponry into their primary symbol. The Expect No Quarter patch. Bandidos who have performed high-level services for the club, often involving violence or significant prison time, may be awarded specialized side patches that indicate their enforcer status, a visual warning to rivals and law enforcement alike. Modern recruitment, the new breed versus the old guard. As the 2020s progress, both clubs face a generational crisis. The traditional biker of the 1970s, the Vietnam vet with a mechanical background, is being replaced by a younger, more volatile demographic. The pagans' Hispanic and urban shift. Under the recent leadership of figures like Keith Conan Richter, the pagans made a controversial tactical decision. They began recruiting from street gangs and urban neighborhoods that were traditionally off-limits. By opening chapters in Puerto Rico and heavily recruiting Hispanic members in Florida, the pagans have rapidly increased their boots on the ground. This has caused internal friction with older members who value the club's traditional roots, but it has made them a much more formidable force in the narcotics trade. The Bandidos' paramilitary professionalism. The Bandidos have taken a different route, often recruiting younger men with active military backgrounds. This has resulted in a shift toward paramilitary tactics. Law enforcement reports from 2023 and 2024 indicate that Bandidos chapters are increasingly using encrypted communication apps, like Signal and Telegram, and drone surveillance to monitor police activity and rival movements. The puppet clubs, asymmetrical warfare. Neither the pagans nor the Bandidos fight their wars alone. They utilize puppet clubs, also known as support clubs, to do the dirty work, while protecting the primary full-patch members from RICO indictments. The Black T-shirt squad, pagans. The pagans utilize a specialized group of enforcers, often referred to as the Black T-shirt squad. These are prospects or members of support clubs who are sent into bars or rallies to provoke rivals. If they are arrested, the Pagans' national leadership remains legally insulated. The Mascareros and support clubs, Bandidos in the south, the Bandidos use clubs like the Mascareros to maintain a monopoly. In 2025, a federal indictment in Texas revealed that the Bandidos forced these support clubs to pay taxes and carry out arson attacks against rivals to maintain the Bandidos' dominance in the Houston area. The Blue Line bloodshed. Recent incidents, 2021 to 2025. The conflict has seen a violent resurgence in the early 2020s as the Pagans' expansion into the Deep South hit a wall of Bandido resistance. The North Carolina Highway Ambush, 2022. In a move straight out of a tactical manual, a group of Pagans were ambushed on E95 in North Carolina. Investigations revealed that the attackers, allegedly linked to Bandido support groups, used cell phone jamming technology to prevent the victims from calling for help before opening fire from a moving SUV. This marked a shift from spontaneous violence to premeditated, high-tech assassination attempts. The Florida Turf War, 2024. As the Pagans attempted to claim sovereign territory in the Florida Panhandle, they clashed directly with the Bandidos' established interests. A series of bar fights in Navarre and Pensacola escalated into the firebombing of several neutral biker hangouts that refused to pick a side. This join or die ultimatum has forced many smaller riding clubs to disband or seek protection, further consolidating the power of the two giants. The financial engines, beyond motorcycles. To maintain 30,000 plus characters of influence, these clubs operate like Fortune 500 companies with a criminal twist. The methamphetamine pipeline. The Pagans have historically maintained strong ties to traditional organized crime families in Philadelphia and New Jersey, acting as the muscle and distribution arm for industrial-scale methamphetamine production. Legitimate fronts. Both clubs have moved heavily into gray market businesses. They own tattoo parlors, security firms, and even trucking companies. These businesses serve a dual purpose. They launder illicit cash and provide a legitimate reason for members to be traveling across state lines with large cargoes. The future of the feud. The battle between the Pagans and the Bandidos is no longer just about who can ride a Harley-Davidson. It is a struggle between two different visions of the American outlaw. The Pagans are betting on volume and aggression, flooding new territories with members to overwhelm the competition. The Bandidos are betting on discipline and technology, using their global network to outmaneuver the authorities and their rivals. As federal agencies continue to unseal RICO indictments through 2026, the only certainty is that the broken oath between these two clubs will continue to claim lives on the American highway. The Pagans' MC is governed by a document often referred to in federal indictments as the Pagan Constitution. Unlike the more democratic structures of smaller clubs, the Pagans operate under a centralized autocracy. The Mother Club and the number 13. At the apex of the Pagan hierarchy is the Mother Club. Traditionally consisting of 13 members, this body acts as the Supreme Court, the Board of Directors, and the War Council. The dictate of the President. The national president of the Pagans holds nearly absolute power. Under the bylaws, any full-patch member who fails to follow a direct order from a Mother Club member is subject to out in bad status, which often includes physical retirement and the forfeiture of all property. The no-touch rule, a little-known bylaw in the Pagan Constitution, forbids members from engaging in certain types of petty street crime that might draw local police attention. They are instructed to focus on high-yield activities, wholesale distribution, rather than low-yield retail sales, a strategy designed to keep the club's name out of local blotters. Recruitment and the breed. The bylaws regarding recruitment have historically been some of the most rigid in the OMC world. For decades, a prospective member, a prospect, had to be a white male over 21 who owned a Harley-Davidson. However, the 2024 amendments to the Constitution, discovered during a raid in Delaware, show a pragmatic shift. The club now allows for associate status for specialized individuals, IT experts, legal consultants, and logistics managers, who do not ride but provide the infrastructure needed for a modern criminal enterprise. The 2025 Houston trials, the RICO defense. In January 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice brought a massive RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, case against the Bandidos Gulf Coast leadership. The defense strategies used in these trials represent a masterclass in legal maneuvering. The social club defense. The primary defense used by Bandidos attorneys, a strategy that has been refined for over 50 years, is the one bad apple theory. Defense teams argued that the Bandidos MC is a charitable non-profit social club whose mission is to promote motorcycle safety and brotherhood. The argument: the defense argued that while individual members may have engaged in drug trafficking or violence, they did so as rogue actors without the knowledge or approval of the club's leadership. The counter-evidence: to combat this, federal prosecutors introduced war wagon logs, digital records found on encrypted servers that showed the National Sergeant-at-Arms approving specific hits and security details for drug shipments. The First Amendment strategy. A significant portion of the 2025 defense focused on the right to associate. Lawyers argued that the government's attempt to ban the wearing of the Fat Mexican patch was a violation of the First Amendment. They successfully argued in preliminary hearings that the patch itself is protected speech, making it much harder for the government to use patch wearing as a standalone proof of criminal intent. The war wagon logistics. Bandidos' tactical prowess. While the Pagans rely on nomadic, decentralized strikes, the Bandidos have perfected the war wagon, a tactical deployment system that has made them the most feared club in the southern United States. Mobilization. When a Bandidos chapter is threatened, the National Sergeant-at-Arms can trigger a call to arms. Within 24 hours, members from 3 or 4 surrounding states converge on a single location. The equipment. Unlike the spontaneous brawls of the past, modern war wagon deployments involve armored SUVs, long-range radio scanners, and, as seen in recent 2025 reports, commercial-grade drones. These drones are used to scout rival clubhouses and monitor police perimeters during high-level meetings. The crash teams. These are specialized units within the Bandidos whose only job is to provide security for the national officers. They are trained in defensive driving and counter-surveillance, making it nearly impossible for the Pagans to execute cold hits on top-tier Bandido leadership. 17. The Puerto Rico expansion, a new front. In 2024 and 2025, the Pagans MC took a gamble that changed the dynamics of the conflict. They officially established multiple chapters in Puerto Rico. This was a strategic move to control the Caribbean pipeline. Bypassing the ports. By establishing a presence in Puerto Rico, the Pagans gained a foothold in a major transshipment point for narcotics moving from South America to the I-95 corridor. The conflict with Bandido affiliates. The Bandidos have long had support clubs in the Caribbean. The arrival of the Pagans led to a series of harborside shootings in San Juan and Ponce. The federal response. The DEA has recently increased its presence in the region, noting that the Pagan Bandido War has effectively turned the island into a staging ground for a much larger struggle over East Coast distribution rights. The evolutionary arms race. As we look toward the remainder of 2026, the Pagans and Bandidos are locked in an evolutionary arms race. It is no longer a fight over who has the faster bike or the tougher members. It is a fight over information, logistics, and legal resilience. The Pagans continue to grow through aggressive, diverse recruitment, turning themselves into a high-volume army that is difficult to suppress through sheer numbers. The Bandidos, meanwhile, have become a special forces of the OMC world, disciplined, tech-heavy, and legally sophisticated. Both clubs have survived for over 60 years because they know how to adapt. While the names on the mother club rosters change and the locations of the Fat Mexican chapters shift, the core conflict remains. Two titans of the American road, forever unable to share the same horizon.